All right, guys, help me out here because I got a little bit lost. Now, Islam went to a press conference and he was doing it with Charles. Charles made a statement to Islam. Now, he made the statement in Portuguese, very relevant because when it got interpreted into English, we're told that Charles said to Islam, "You're a great champion," which would not be true in terms of Islam being the champion. This was made a big deal of. I'm not confident in telling you that the interpreter got it right. I mean, I hear him get it wrong all the time, but that would be a weird thing to say. But Islam, in return, talked about Charles and said, I view Charles as the champion. I'm the challenger and he's the champion. That's fine. Whatever these greats do, and these two are great, whatever the greats do and whatever mindset they have to get into, including fiction, I'm very open to it and I'm also open to hearing it. It's interesting to me. But why? Why would Islam consider Charles the champion? What does that mean? Is that a way of showing respect? Because many of you do that too. Many of you fans do that. Daniel Cormier, behind the desk working for the UFC, said that we all know that Charles is the champion. So I'm just sharing. I mean, that's very common. It's not true. That is an inaccurate statement. But if you did consider Charles the champion, how does that help you? If you're creating a fictional framework to begin with, how does that serve you? Do you fight harder if you're fighting the champion? Because if you do, then adversely, I wouldn't even need to ask. That would mean the other side of the coin is if you're the champion and you're defending, you're not going to fight as hard. So what is it that changes? Why create a mythical world? And I'm a big believer in always put yourself in a situation where you know you can succeed. Right? If Islam's got to go to bed at night and he's got to convince himself, I can beat Charles Oliveira, that might be hard for him to believe. Just by example, just use Islam and Charles. That might be hard for him to believe. Well, then back it up and put yourself in a different situation. Don't put yourself in the octagon, on Fight Island, on a pay-per-view for the world title with millions of dollars on the line. Don't do that if that's too much for you. Back it up. Are you the toughest guy in your block? If Charles comes to Islam's neighborhood, is all of a sudden Charles is in charge. They're playing basketball, Charles takes the ball. I mean, is that the way that it works? Maybe. Maybe you live on a tough block. Back it up a little bit further. Are you the toughest guy in your house? If Charles comes, is all of a sudden he's taking the remote control. Is that how this works? Maybe you got a tough house. You got to back it up to your bedroom. Are you the baddest dude in that room? Are you sure? If you're sure you are, then that means if Charles comes to your bedroom, you're still the man. And if that's true, then you'll be the toughest guy in the house. What's the difference? Which means you'll be the toughest guy in the block. What's the difference? Which means you can go beat him in the octagon on Saturday night. I'm a firm believer of that. That doesn't necessarily make it so. It's just a mindset. But I'm very curious as to why we're doing that. I'm asking you guys, because you do it. Why are you saying Charles is the champion? Is it because you don't know that he's not? Or are you just trying to give us the ending that you wish was true? You don't feel Charles should have been stripped. You don't think that that was right. He did not lose. As a matter of fact, he won. As a matter of fact, he won in impressive fashion in what was stated to be a world title fight. I'm like, I would listen to your case. It wouldn't make you right. I would just know where you're coming from because I think you're doing it to be polite. I don't think you're doing it because you're stupid, but you might be. Like, I would agree with you all the time, but the only thing that would do is make us both wrong. So I'm just curious, why are we pretending Charles is the champion? Then moreover, at least according to Islam, it's more helpful to be the challenger, to be out there to win something, to take something, to bring somebody down. That's at least what he's telling us by making up the fictional story that Charles is the champion. But isn't Charles doing the same thing in reverse? Charles is pretending to be the champion. So in Islam's mind, he's going to fight harder and want it more and dig deeper if he's the challenger. And in Charles's mind, he's going to fight harder, dig deeper, if he's protecting something. Two guys doing the same thing at the same weight class at the exact same time with a very different approach. One is pretending he's the challenger and one is pretending he's the champion. I'm just asking why. Nobody wrong there. I would always encourage you to put yourself in a different situation, but why stop there? Why doesn't Islam just pretend that Charles is his little sister? Why doesn't he just pretend he's fighting George St. Pierre? Why doesn't he just pretend, maybe he likes to scare himself. He should pretend that he's fighting Francis Ngannou. I just don't understand it. I mean, but I really don't. I really don't. And I'll have pushback. I'll be called a hater. Charles is not the champion. Hard stop. Right there. That's also my statement. There's no hate involved. Even if I had an evil pleasure in the fact that he was stripped, it still makes me right. Charles is not the champion. And I like to get ahead of this only because on Monday morning, you're all going to agree with me. If Charles wins this fight, come Monday morning, you're going to want him called two-time champion. You're all going to come along this journey with me. I'm just here 3 days early. If Islam wins the fight, Charles was never that good to start with. He's got 8 losses. Some bitch, they're all by submission. And hell, he's even been beat by the scale 2 or 3 times. That's the way the story's going to go. Just the way that these stories do go. I wish that we could all get on the same car and we could all drive in the same direction together so that we can enjoy this. And some of you are going to have your nose rubbed in it. That's part of being a fan. I take my pick, you take your pick. We have an argument. Those boys settle, then one of us has to feel like a fool. That's part of being a fan. So Charles is claiming to be champion. Islam is backing up claiming that he's champion. But Charles is telling Islam that once upon a time he was a very good champion. I mean, right, it's one of these things. Why not just have Batman fight Superman? Why not just do that? I mean, if we're just making things up, why not pretend that they both have a knife? Why not pretend that this is a 3-hour contest? Why not pretend that it's at 195 pounds? I mean, what difference does it make at that point? And while I say that, I truly don't begrudge it. Like, as a competitor, you have to be very careful what you let into your bubble. You have to be very careful what you believe to be real. Brainwashing is a very real thing. It's just every time you guys hear about it, it's used as a negative, like some cult is doing it or somebody has brainwashed you or inundated. You can brainwash yourself, but you can do it for very positive things. You tell yourself through daily affirmations, I am the best, I am going to win, here's whatever it might be, you will then believe it to be true. Those are good things. I don't begrudge them. I'm just wondering how we have 2 guys in the exact same position that believe the exact opposite thing. Charles wants the world to believe that he's the champion. There's something about that position that is more protective and is more high-handed. There's something about being champion that he likes to the point that he's making it up. But the same thing goes for Islam. Islam sees something with being the contender, with being the challenger that is so valuable, he is creating a fake story that he's taking on the champion. Why? But what does it mean moving forward? That's why it's important to identify. I couldn't care less. I'm just making an observation of what I saw. I would like to know why. So moving forward, if Islam wins the belt, right, if the best position for Islam is to be the challenger, which is what he's telling us to the fact that he's making up a scenario. Then if he wins the belt, what should we expect of him? And maybe he just does the same thing again. Maybe whoever his next opponent is, let's call it Volkanovski. Now, Volkanovski's the champion. I'm not the champion yet. I mean, maybe it stays consistent, but maybe it doesn't. So maybe we should store this away. Maybe we should wait 4 months and see if we're getting the same answer. Charles is not the champion. And if you're Team Charles, you don't want him to be the champion if he wins, because you want him to be a 2-time champion. You will get to where I'm at. Now, I'm in a place, right, I'm operating on what used to be. When I was born in my entire life, until about 3 years ago, what I am doing is I'm operating on what used to be our societal gold standard. It's known as reality. Reality is no longer the gold standard, at least not in America. It is now emotion. It's not what happened. It's how did it make you feel? That is now our gold standard. So according to popular opinion and the participants themselves, Charles is the champion. If Charles wins, he's still the champion. Don't call him a 2-time champion. Unless you want to be with me. If you want to stay in Crazyville, you can't do it. If you want to come along with me and live in reality, the belt is up for grabs. We have 2 challengers. They still need to make weight. If one of them doesn't, to hell with them, we'll bring in Volkanovski. That is a reality.